Hi everyone, and welcome to Deep Geek Live. Particular welcome if you're watching this live in the chat. Hi there, but also welcome if you are watching this back later. I know a lot of people do watch this live and they get involved in the chat, and I hopefully will have enough time to get to some questions from the chat today. But I know a lot of people also watch this back later. So if that's you, thank you, and a particular welcome to you as well. Today we're going to be looking at The Winds of Winter, the next volume of A Song of Ice and Fire. Now, in answer to the question, lots of people have sort of been asking me since I put this title up. No, it hasn't arrived. We have had no announcement, but we are now, I think, in the last stretch building up to having The Winds of Winter. And I think that with what we know through the books that we've had so far, as well as what we've seen on the show, which won't be exactly the same, but gives us some pointers, I think we can start mapping out a few of the things that we think are going to be happening in The Winds of Winter. And over the next month or two, or probably 2 or 3 months actually, I'm going to be doing a series of videos setting out some predictions, if you like, about what will be happening in some of the key areas of the plot. What's going to be happening over in Meereen with Daenerys, and what's going to be happening with Jon at the Wall. What about in the north around Winterfell? What about Arya, Sansa, things like that? So trying to pick up on what some of the key plot lines and trying to trace out what we know so far, and therefore what we can expect will happen in The Winds of Winter. So that's all to come. Today, what I want to do is just answer some questions, try and set a little bit of a framework for what we're looking at. As always, I am going to be framing this on questions I get from my patrons. So thank you, patrons. But I will get to as many questions as I can from the chat as we go through. So let's kick off with a question from Jerry with a Polish-looking surname that I won't attempt to pronounce, so I don't butcher it. But Jerry asks, my only question is, when will it drop? Now, this is a good place to start. So we don't know is the short answer. George R.R. Martin continually comes out with these kind of like, oh, I'm nearly there, I'm working hard, and if it doesn't happen by this time next year, then shoot me. These kinds of things. The latest thing that he said is that he expects it to be done by the time of Worldcon 2020, which is in New Zealand, so that's in the summer of next year. So that's what he's aiming for. Now, to me, that means that if he's thinking he could theoretically finish it in the next 6 months, then he is in the last part of this. So realistically, even if he did finish it then, and he's not got a great track record of finishing when he says that things are going to finish, even if he did finish it then, there will still be a matter of a few months for translations and book covers and printing and editing, basically. So there's a huge amount of work that will need to get done. So I don't think we're going to see it, to be honest, for another year. I had hoped, and for a long time I said that I was hoping for November this year. That's clearly not going to happen, but it won't happen, I now think, for at least another year. So that's where we're at. We are now in the last, I think, few months, year or two before we see it, but it's still a reasonable way off. Okay, so second, that's where we're at. Second question from Bonds saying, hi Robert, who do you think the Winds of Winter first chapter will be, and from whose point of view will it be, and who will be the person who dies? This is a great kind of question to get us going. So for those who haven't spotted the kind of the thread that George R.R. Martin does on his books in A Song of Ice and Fire, what he tends to do is a prologue for each of the books that comes from a random POV, a character that we've not really seen before, or perhaps won't again, and they tend to die within that book, quite often within that chapter. So we get people like, for example, in book 1, obviously from the Night's Watchman, and then we get later on we get people like Varamir, and we get people like Pate. characters who die, but they are there just to give us a slightly different perspective on what's happening. And we often see something important through their eyes, through the eyes of someone who's not been that central to the plot, but they see things and they're telling us something about what's happening in the plot as a whole. So the question is, who is it going to be this time? I think yes, George R. R. Martin probably will carry on doing this. So I think that there's a fair chance that we might see another character that we perhaps never even met before, who will die at some point, either in that chapter or later on in that book. And it will in some way characterize or show an important theme that's going to be happening there. So in the prologue of book 1, we were introduced to the others, and we were made to see immediately that this is not just some kind of rumor, some kind of nursery tale, that this is actually real, and that informs everything that happens through the rest of that story. So I think that he probably will do something similar. I wonder, this is just a guess, and I do not know. I do wonder whether we might see a point of view from, say, one of the Carls over Daenerys has been being captured as we left it by the Khalasar. As we saw on the show, she's going to be taken back to Vaes Dothrak, and then the Carls will die. That's what happened on the show. That's what all of the hints that we've got from the House of the Undying and so on are about in the books. So that seems to be what's going to happen. So if I had to guess, it may well be that we will see one of these Carls from their perspective, and then that will be a marker that they will die. And the kind of the overall theme there that we're seeing will be Daenerys moving from being this character who is right at the very bottom with absolutely no possessions and no power. And the theme of her, we'll get onto this in a moment, I'm sure, the theme of her journey in this book will be moving from that position of powerlessness, going back to the start, as it were, and how she gets from there to where at the end of the story, I suspect she will appear to be in quite a powerful position and a lot more Targaryen-y, if that's a word. In the last book, it was her grappling with this concept of being a Targaryen, but also wanting to be a good ruler where she was. Now, this book, I think she'll be much more grasping hold of what it means to be a Targaryen and to lead this invasion that she's been wanting to do for so long. Let's go with, we'll come back to the POV characters. Got another couple of questions about them in a moment. Maura Lee, thank you so much. I saw you did a couple of super stickers before we went live. Thank you for that, as well as a super chat saying, in honor of Bloodraven and Howland Reed, can't wait to see if we will get to read any POV chapters from Howland Reed. Would like to know more about him and the role he will play in the Winds of Winter regarding Jon and Bran's story arcs. Now, my take on this is, yes, I would love to see a POV chapter from either of those characters. Bloodraven one would be amazing. Howland Reed would be amazing. My best guess is Howland Reed we're not going to see until A Dream of Spring. I think he's going to sit out one more book. And I think he will arrive with all the information about what did happen back at the Tower of Joy and who Jon is and things like that. I think he will arrive perhaps at the very end of this book, but probably in the next book. So I don't think we're going to see a POV from his perspective. In terms of Bloodraven, I would love it, but I have a feeling that we are going to just have Bran from seeing what's happening with Bran, and we will have fewer and fewer from Bran as we go along, as he becomes less and less him and he gets to learn more and more. I think that the chapters will get very hard to, I mean, George R. R. Martin, I'm sure he's up to it, but to actually put across a good POV chapter from his perspective, with him knowing so much but keeping us still in the dark. So I think that whereas for someone like Ned in book 1, what George R. R. Martin very skillfully did was that he hinted at stuff, he made Ned remember things, but without giving us the detail. Bran is learning these things for the first time, so if we're in his head, then we will experience them with him, and I think that's a very different thing from being in somebody's point of view chapter where they're just remembering or not remembering something which had happened before. But thank you, Maura, that was as a good question. Mod Mary, thank you so much for the super chat, saying George R. R. Martin has said we will see no gods appear in the books, but the characters' belief in their actions will be influenced by the gods, magic, etc. My guess is, like most organized religion, some upsets. Yeah, I mean, from your main point there, absolutely. George R. R. Martin has said we're not going to see the gods. What he's fascinated in is how belief in the gods or belief in prophecy or belief in anything like that impacts on humans and people's actions. And this is seen in Melisandre. It doesn't matter so much whether the red god exists. What matters there is the fact that Melisandre believes it absolutely, and that impacts on who she is as a person and what she does. Cersei, with her absolute belief in Maggie the Frog's prophecy, shapes who she is and shapes what she does, because particularly in the books, she gets very paranoid about Tyrion, thinking that Tyrion's going to be the Valonqar. We saw in the show, I think it will happen again in the books as well, about this idea that Marjorie is going to be the one who's going to be taking everything away from her. So yeah, it's about the character, not that. In terms of, like most organized religions, some upsets, yeah, I think that what we will see is we won't see anything proven or disproven about the gods. I think that's going to be up in the air still. It's just going to be a matter of belief. What you will see is that for some religions, like the Faith of the Seven, there will be something along the lines of what we saw on the show when we get the Faith Militant Rising, when we get the High Sparrow and things like that. That is definitely going to take place, and that again is going to be influencing the action. We will see kind of juxtapositions of people who believe in the same faith but have very different outlooks. So we will see what happens on the Quiet Isle, which we saw with the elder brother Ian McShane character on the show. That is going to be a very different outlook from what happens with the High Sparrow and things like that. So there will be some upsets. Organized religion will be used by people as much as people will gain sort of solace and inspiration from it. So yes, it will have a number of different aspects. Brennan Barnes, thank you for the super chat. What's the aftermath of Jon's murder and the red letter? I think, assume you mean the pink letter. Stannis's death at the wall feels like a powder keg. Yeah. So there's a lot to go into there. So the pink letter actually is what my next main video, hopefully next week, I'm going to be doing, just starting off this kind of series about what's going to be happening in the Winds of Winter. The pink letter, for those who don't know, they did show it on the show, but they didn't major on it. But this is quite a big thing in the books, was that this letter arrives purportedly from Ramsay Bolton, basically just completely baiting Jon and dismissing and everything that's been happening at the wall, hurling abuse at the ceremony, the wildling submission ceremony which happened. Stannis, Melisandre, everybody gets insulted. And Jon reads this letter and he gets incensed and announces that he's not going to go off and do what he said he was going to do, which is go off and go up to Hardhome, but he's going to head down to Winterfell. Now, that is what prompted, as much as anything else, the murder of Jon. So the aftermath of Jon's murder is going to be Jon will be dead. Jon, I think I've said many times before, many others have said it, I think that he is going to, as he is dying, he's going to walk into Ghost. I think that we will see a Ghost chapter in The Winds of Winter that is Jon in Ghost. I think he will be brought back by Melisandre, but it will be calling his soul spirit back into his body rather than a kind of a resurrection, as it were. So it's going to be a slightly different thing. The upshot, however, I suspect will be the same, which is that Jon will leave the Night's Watch. The Night's Watch are hugely depleted. They've given over most of the forts along the wall to the wildlings. This is actually the Night's Watch are almost on their last legs, and when Jon goes, as he surely will, then I don't hold out huge hope for them. There is a lot going on there, it has to be said. The Grand Northern conspiracy about what's happening in Winterfell, I will get into in a video. The other thing that I would point out, though, is going to happen is that so the person who is supposedly Arya, who was married to Ramsay Bolton in the books, this was different again to the show. He didn't marry Sansa. He married someone who was supposedly Arya. It wasn't actually Arya. It was Jane Poole, a childhood friend of the Starks. She has been released. There's a daring rescue with Theon, and Stannis has now sent her up to the wall to Jon Snow. When she gets there, Jon will say, "That's not Arya." So that is one little twist that we're going to be getting there, but that does not mean that Jon will not want to go back to Winterfell. I think he will. As you say, feels like a powder keg. I think it is a powder keg. There's huge amounts of stuff going on there, and added to which we've got people like Mance Rayder, who's still plotting. We've got Stannis, who's alive and well and doing stuff, and we've got Bran / Bloodraven, who will be starting to manipulate events even more than they already have been, I personally think. Shade of the Evening, thank you very much. What about a prologue in the Citadel? Can't wait to see this. Kerry McDonald. Yeah, I saw you changed your username, Kerry. Hi, great to see you. Need to make a video so people know my new name. Thanks for being awesome. You're very welcome. A prologue in the Citadel. Yeah, we've already had the one random chapter in the Citadel, which was Pate. So I think perhaps we'll have it somewhere else this time. So Pate, for those who don't know, he was just this kind of novice who was killed by a character who almost certainly was Jaqen H'ghar, who appears to be searching for a book about the death of dragons. There's a whole extra plot going on there. If you're interested in that, I did 2, maybe even more years ago, I did a whole series of videos on what Jaqen was doing in Old Town and things like that. So do go check that out. So we could have a prologue in the Citadel, but yeah, as I say, if I had to guess, I think somewhere over on Essos, because we've not really had that yet, would work quite well. Shall we go back to, we were talking about POV chapters. So Chase asked from Patreon, says, "Hi Robert, do you think we will get new POV chapters, or are we at the limit and we'll start going back down now?" Also, there's a side question which I'll answer first. Actually, I haven't read either The Knight of the Seven Kingdoms or Fire and Blood. Which one should I treat myself to? I think that, or both, but it really depends on what you're looking for. If you're looking for a really fun, quick read that you get more from when you're rereading it, and you will fall in love with the central characters, then yeah, the Duncan Egg stories, The Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, absolutely love them. I personally recommend that you, if you listen to audiobooks, the audiobooks are exceptionally well narrated. Harry Lloyd, who's the guy who plays Viserys, I think, on the show, does them, and he is brilliant. I mean, as good as I've ever heard an audiobook. So I would highly recommend that. Fire and Blood is also very good, but it's more of a kind of a history. So you do get the characters, but it moves over a wider swathe of time. So you don't get such a story, beginning and end of story. You just get a swathe of time. If you're interested in Targaryens, go for that one. If you're wanting stories that are lighter in tone but no less well written, then go for Dunk and Egg. The first half of your question, though, was about new POV characters. By the way, in the chat, if you've got any opinions on which one, then please do say whether to go for Night of the Seven Kingdoms or for Fire and Blood. But the first is about new POV characters, or are we going to be at the limit? I think we probably now will start generally coming back in. George R.R. Martin has been widening the story out, and now he is going to start having to draw it back in. So we're going to see a lot of these kind of characters, particularly characters like, I predict, Victarion will die. So we're going to start losing some of these characters who we've been seeing things through their eyes. Now, I think we will have these kind of one-off chapters, like I was saying with the prologue, maybe another one or two elsewhere, of just completely random characters who we've not seen before. But realistically, if George R.R. Martin wants to finish in the 2 books, and he still says he's going to try and finish in 2 books, then we have to start cutting down either the amount of characters who've got POVs or the amount of chapters each character gets. Now, it's possible either way, but what it means is that I think what we're not going to see is, so in last book, he dropped in a random Melisandre chapter. I don't think that what we're going to see is that suddenly her becoming a main POV character. I don't think we're going to get any new main POV characters. I think we're going to see things through the eyes of some of the characters who may not be main characters. So, for example, John Connington, I think that we will see a huge amount about what's going on there with Aegon Fagon's invasion through his eyes, rather than getting a new POV from anyone else in that camp. So I think he's unlikely to add in new main ones, but you know, maybe he will. If he does, then I humbly predict it won't be 2 books, because he does have to start bringing it in a little bit now. Chili Roo, thank you so much for the super chat, saying, can't stick around because I'm not totally caught up at the moment, but your video about Howland and Ashara is now my favorite theory ever. I love Ashara. I'm really pleased to hear that. I do really like that theory about Howland Reed and Ashara Dane. For those who don't know it, it's that Howland Reed and Ashara Dane were lovers, and that their child was Mira Reed, and that they're now happily living together in the Neck, which, if you've never heard this before, sounds a little bit, why don't we just pick 2 random characters and say they got together? But the more you dig into it, the more it just makes sense. So I really like that. It's not something that I could say 100% definite, because we don't have 100% categoric evidence on it, but it just makes sense. So yeah, I'm glad you enjoyed it. It's a lovely little theory. It's not uniquely mine, but I think that in my video I put my own spin on it and my own things that I think were quite important. But yeah, please do check that out if you're interested. Casey of House Lawbridge says, what character, besides Howland Reed, you know me so well, would you most like to have a POV from or be introduced to? I think this is a tough one. So one of the characters who is mysterious enough that we don't 100% know what their game is and what they're after. So it would be someone, let's say Melisandre would have been top of my list before we had that. Bloodraven would be absolutely fascinating, but characters like Varys or Littlefinger, I would love to just get inside their mind and try and figure out what their plan is, rather than just seeing them through other people's eyes, because they have so much information. I think those are probably the main people. I can't think of any other characters off the top of my head that, I mean, unless you go really quite obscure and go to someone like Quaithe, but she's not really so central that that she would get a POV chapter. Yeah, so I think I'll stick with them. Let's go with Littlefinger and Varys for that. Shade of the Evening says, Seven Hells, I forgot about Pate, BOV from Sam. Yeah, so Pate reappears at the very end of the book as well in Sam's chapter, and we see him, and it's very obvious that he has been killed and somebody has taken his position. So that's part of why we're thinking that there's this is a faceless man who took Pate, or killed Pate. People in the chat are asking whether Rob or John is older. Ned is very clear that Rob is older. This is for purely ease of inheritance. It just makes everything very clear and doesn't, so nobody would say, but your eldest son is there. So we do not know. It could well be, if you work out the timelines, it could be either way around theoretically. My gut instinct is that John is probably older, but Ned's just found it easier to say no, Rob is. Shadow Fox, hi there, saying, hi Robert, I'm sure we've all read the pre-released chapters of The Winds of Winter. I wonder what you found most interesting or illuminating and helped you with theories for the next book. So, for those who don't know, there have been a number of pre-released chapters from The Winds of Winter. Now, these come with a number of caveats. George R.R. Martin has released these in a number of different forms. One of them, I think the Theon chapter, was included as a sort of a next time chapter at the back of A Dance with Dragons in some editions. A couple of chapters he's read out at conventions. A couple he's released on his website. Some he's just sort of like spoken to people, and we haven't got a verbatim recording of it. So they're in a variety of different shapes, and he says until the book is released, none of them should be taken as absolute truth. So that's the caveat. However, they clearly are very, very close to the end drafts. Now, if anyone doesn't have them, you can find over my Patreon page that I have done audio recordings of all of the pre-release chapters that we do have from The Winds of Winter. There are, I wish I could remember the exact number, maybe 12. I don't know. There's a Theon one, which is basically one about Stannis. There's an Arya one called Mercy. There's an Sansa one called Alicent. There's two Tyrion ones. There's Barristan one, two Victarion ones, and two Arianne ones, and I feel I've forgotten one as well. But we've got a lot of different chapters from different characters. In terms of which has given me the most to go on, I think for me personally, it was the Arianne chapters. Now, Arianne's not a show character. This is Dora Martell's daughter, and she's basically been sent out on a mission to find Aegon, and to decide, is he real? Should we have a partnership with him? And from that, I personally got a lot of my understanding about where House Martell is going to be in the next book, and I think that they're going to be quite major players in the next book. So I found that really useful. But in terms of where the what's happening over in Meereen is going to be, then it's not one particular character. It's lots of the interplay of them showing us exactly what the situation is while Daenerys is off. What the situation is with this huge battle with so many of these characters all coming into one place. We've got Tyrion, we've got Jorah, we've got Barristan, we've got Victarion, we've got Moqorro, we've got lots of these characters all suddenly congregating in one place in one battle, and that tells us a huge amount about how that is going to be going down. Okay, so Brandon Dierker says, I expect the Winds of Winter will be a lot like Feast for Crows, in the sense it will focus on one area or storyline. We will likely hear reports and rumors of the Southern activities, but the POV will be of the North. If that's the case, I believe the South will basically be settled by the end of the Winds of Winter, and Danny or the Southron Victor head north as a sort of a cliffhanger. And as a sort of an added bit there, do I think that Danny will make it north in the Winds of Winter? Well, there's a lot in there. I think in terms of the first question, whether it's going to be the book is going to be focusing just on one area, I don't think I would agree with that. I think that it will cover a huge range of different places, because the story has got so large, it now can't just focus on one area. Where this book is going to, or what this book is going to do, is start to draw these threads together, so we don't just have everybody spread out. The characters are going to start coming back together again. Now, what he may do, in fact, what I almost certain that he will have to do, is break the Winds of Winter down into 2 books, probably released at the same time, but simply because physically the amount of manuscript pages he's been talking about is just too many for one volume. I think he's going to have to put it into 2 volumes. He may decide to break those 2 volumes down into, here's one looking at the North and here's one looking at what's going on in the Essos and the South, but there's no I think by the end of it, we will have seen what happens firsthand across all of the storylines in the different parts of the world. So that's where I think we're going to be getting to, because we've got just too many characters and too many new POVs and too many existing POVs from the South that he wouldn't just stop them. When you create Arianne as a POV character and you create John Connington as a POV character, and you've still got Barristan, and you've still got Tyrion, and you've still got Daenerys, then once you get all of those characters, as well as the characters already based in King's Landing, then I think that you have to use them, because otherwise we're just completely blindsided to it. I can't see a position where we just get no Daenerys chapters, or no Cersei chapters, or no Tyrion chapters, for example. Now, this, I think, ties into a question I've got later, but in terms of whether the South, what's going on in the South, will basically be settled by the end of the Winds of Winter, and then Dany heading north at the end of it. My take is that that's possible, but there is a huge amount of story to go before we get to a point where we have a victor in the South. So first of all, we've got what's going on with Aegon's invasion. They've got to meet up with the Martells. There's got to be some politicking going on there. We've got what's happening in King's Landing after Varys is clearly doing a huge amount of stuff behind the scenes there. Then I'm sure we're going to have an invasion or a siege, an attack on King's Landing. All the hints are that maybe we're going to get some kind of outbreak of something like Grayscale or something like that as well. That's all got to happen. And then Daenerys, simply to get to Westeros, she has to go through her whole storyline up with the Dothraki. She needs to get up there to Vaes Dothrak. She needs to burn it down. She needs to do her stirring speech, getting all of the Dothraki on her side. She needs to come back to Meereen. Then she'll just suddenly, all these people have been descending on her. There's also Marwyn the Mage is coming over to try and be her advisor as well. She's got huge amounts of people that she will need to meet. She will need to figure out how to get across to Westeros, and there are also a few places on the way that she might want to stop off and do a little burning to, like the other slaving cities or Pentos or places like that. All of that has to happen even before she gets anywhere near Westeros, and that's a lot of story. So my best guess is that actually what we're going to have is at the end of the Winds of Winter, we're probably going to have Aegon in King's Landing, the Lannisters pushed out, and then Dany about to come in and invade. I think that's probably where we're going to end up. Maybe she will have already landed. Maybe she will take Dragonstone. Who knows? But that seems to be where she's going to be ending up. So the plot for A Dream of Spring, I think, then picks up from the how does that get slightly resolved, then what happens afterwards, and all of that leaves a huge amount of time for also the massive amount of plot we've got up in the north to do with what's happening with Stannis, what's happening with Jon at the Wall. Fundamentally, we've got to have Sansa at some point appearing, presumably with the Knights of the Vale coming up there as well. We've got Boltons have to be dealt with, and then they need to be facing against whatever the threats starting to come from the others, so that we've got a huge amount of plot that's going to be there. So let's grab another question from Patreon. Maura Lee says, Jon is dead. How will he be brought back? Will Melisandre help? What do you think Jon will do once he's brought back? Will he want revenge? Where will he go from there? So I sort of answered this one already. I think that when he comes back, then I think he will still be riled up. I think he will still want to leave the Night's Watch. I think that he will see the technicality again that, you know, his watch is over because he has died. And I think that he will take that, and I think that he will head down, and he will hear that although the Stark he's been presented with isn't actually Arya, I think that he will hear the message that Rickon has been found, and that the loyal northern houses, the Manderleys, the Umbers, people like that, they are going to rally behind Rickon as a figurehead and try and retake Winterfell. With Stannis potentially, although Stannis is going to try and take Winterfell first. So there's a lot going on there, but I think that Jon is going to be, although he will still have connection to the Wall, I think that he will leave as Night's Watch Lord Commander in the same way he did on the show. Marcus Aurelius says, what do you think will happen with Brienne and Jaime in the Winds of Winter? How will they get out of their current predicament? Yeah, so they... Brienne has been caught by Lady Stoneheart. We'll talk about her in a moment as well. And basically, she is... the hints are that she gets out of it by... promising to take Jaime Lannister to Lady Stoneheart. So I think that where they're going to get out of it is that I think that Brienne will show herself to be loyal, and all that to the Starks effectively, with Jaime, I'm not 100% sure. I'll be honest, that we haven't had enough plot and hints about exactly what's going to happen there because Lady Stoneheart wasn't on the show. But Jaime will survive, and I think that he will survive because Brienne will save him in a kind of a match for when Brienne was caught earlier on in their sort of nearly relationship. Brienne was caught, and then Jaime came to save her. I think that the same thing will kind of happen in the Winds of Winter. Jaime will be in the fix, and then Brienne will come and save him. That's how I can see it kind of panning out. I don't know the details as yet because we haven't got enough information to make a solid guess on that one yet, but that seems to be roughly where we're at on it. Good question, though. Joseph Anderson, thank you so much for a super sticker. That's very kind. Aaron Daniel says, quit my job so can't donate so much. Well, honestly, I appreciate any of the super chats. Blow me away, so thank you. That's very generous. But I've seen your entire Traveler's Guide in 4 days. Wow, that must have taken some time. I'm glad you enjoyed it. That makes me really happy. So worth it. Osha for Queen. Oh, it would be amazing. Osha is actually Osha is This was a long time ago, but George R. R. Martin was asked at some point around seasons 3 or 4 if there were any of the characters on the show where the representations of those characters as they were portrayed has made him change his way of writing any of the characters in the books. And the character that he picked up on was Osha, and he said that she was so much more that I've forgotten the name of the actress who played her, but she was so much more than he was thinking, so much more sort of rounded but still wildling character, and he was going to try and bring a bit more of that into how he wrote her in the future. So yeah, she's a great character. Love it to bits. I don't think though she will be queen, for the simple reason that she's not Anila. He doesn't do that. Natalie Tenner, or Tena, is people are saying in the chat as the actress. Thank you. Let's do another question from Patreon. Christian Isidoro says, hey Robert, what specifically about John do you think might change following his resurrection? Do you subscribe to the theory that he will no longer be a POV character when he returns to his body? No, I don't subscribe to that. I think that he will still remain a POV character. I think he's one of the key characters who we will see right through to the end from their perspective. I think we will see a chapter, as I said earlier, a chapter from Ghost's perspective when he is in Ghost. And I think that this is what will fundamentally change when he goes back into being his body, is that he will be, he will lose a bit of himself, but he will be more wolfish. I think that that's the sort of the hint that we've been given about what happens if you're, from the Varamir chapters particularly, if you're in the body of one of your animals that you've got a link with, after you die, is yes, you survive, but over time you become less you and you just become subsumed more within that wolf or whatever animal it is. And so if John is out being Ghost, then he will become slightly less himself and slightly more ghost-like. So what that means, I think, is he will be slightly more feral, easier looking to kill, like a wolf, but also quieter. Ghost is called Ghost not just because of the coloring, but also because Ghost is very quiet. So I think he will become quieter. I think he will say less. And I do wonder whether there's also a hint there that Ghost, the coloring with the white fur and the red eyes, is very connected in with Bloodraven. And Bloodraven obviously had white skin and red eyes, and there are various other characters who have got similar coloring who are connected strongly with him. So I do wonder whether this will make John symbolically reflect Bloodraven a little bit more. Bloodraven, of course, is a Targaryen bastard, so this shouldn't surprise us, but I think that symbolically we might be seeing a little bit more of that. So that's where I think the character might go. I think that shorthand, John will become quite a darker character. He's still quite idealistic in the books, but I think he'll become quite a darker character in the books as a result of what happened. Let's, as I always do about halfway through my live streams, I just take a moment to let you know what's coming up on my channel. I meant to show you an In Deep Geek mug at this point, but I entirely forgot to bring it with me. In Deep Geek merchandise is now available. I mentioned that for two reasons. Firstly, if you're interested in some merchandise, there's a link down in the description below. But also, a couple of weeks or so ago, I launched a sort of a a promotion. If you wish to join as a $10 patron over on Patreon, then you could get a free mug. That's now closed, but and people have started getting their mugs. There was a bit of a backlog going on, I'm afraid, guys. They told me over there at Spreadshirt, who I've got doing these things, but they are now being shipped. So if you haven't got your mug yet, it should be on your way. That goes the same for $10 patrons who are existing $10 patrons who asked for a mug as well. Who I felt it only fair that my existing $10 patrons should get exactly the same as new people coming on board. So if you've not got it yet, it is on its way. I've been seeing all the shipping notices going out over the last couple of days. In terms of content, although actually now I should say patrons, thank you. I always say this should have been the perfect link, but anyway, patrons, thank you. I cannot do this without you. I say it every single time. That's why I like to do things like that, just to give out free stuff for my patrons, because I cannot do what I do without your support. One of the things I do for my patrons is that I give a chance every now and then to influence future content, get a chance to sort of say what you want. Well, I asked my $10 patrons a couple of weeks ago what they wanted from my Lord of the Rings content coming up. And they said that they wanted the histories, the background. They wanted to understand the overall story, not just what we know from Lord of the Rings, but what's the backdrop and what's the sort of the history, particularly sort of the backdrop to what we're going to see when the TV show happens. So that's what I'm starting to focus on. I did a video on Numenor, which is the greatest human civilization in Tolkien's Legendarium. That's now live. It went up yesterday, so I will be doing a few more videos along those lines over the course of the next few months. I'm also going to be doing over the course of the next few months as well, the rest of my Robert's Rebellion series. I think I've got 3 or possibly 4 more videos to go. I've got them mapped out now, so it's going to happen. And as I said, I'm also looking to be doing a few more videos looking at the Winds of Winter. I should have said, if you're at all interested in being a patron, there is a link down in the description below. But that's enough about what's coming up. Thank you for the super chat, JC, and a lot of other letters, saying, do you like the theory that the prologue for the Winds of Winter will be Ilan Payne in the West? And do you think his death will be in the jaws of Nymeria? Oh, that's a good question. Yeah, it's a good theory. I think so. Ilan Payne is the headsman who killed Ned Stark. So what we have got, he will definitely die at the hands of a Stark in some way. I'm absolutely sure. He's already on Arya's list. Incidentally, he was on her list on the show, but they took him off because the actor was seriously ill at the time, so they sort of wrote him out. But there are 3 options. I think option number 1 is Lady Stoneheart. She is hunting down everybody who's done wrong against her family. Option number 2 would be Arya herself, although obviously at the moment she's in Bravos, but she will come across and try and finish off her list. Option number 3 is Nymeria. I do like this, and I do think that there's a very good chance that Nymeria, Arya is very strongly bonded still with Nymeria. We saw in her pre-release chapter from the Winds of Winter, she wakes up. The first thing that happens is she wakes up having been having these wolf dreams and still tasting blood in her mouth. So the link is still strong. And yes, it makes sense to me that Nymeria will be going out and seems to be picking off a few people that you would expect if she were still on the side of the Starks. She's been taking out some Frey guards, for example, and things like that. Will that be the POV chapter, the prologue? I mean, it's possible. I'm not going to say no. I think that, yeah, the more I think about it, the more I like it. It's a good idea. I still like the idea of having somebody over in Essos to sort of show that bit, but this will be one of the themes of this book, is what's the absolute mess going on in the Riverlands. And so, yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if we get that. And what else have we got? So Amanda Robinson, thank you so much for the super sticker with a little diamond. Thank you, that's very kind. Just spotted on the way past, Shane Vincent's asking, do you think we'll find out House Dane's words in the Winds of Winter? If so, what do you think they are? My money is on dawn brings the light, or dawn ends the night, or similar. Yeah, I think it's the words will be something like that. For those who don't know, the House Dane words, George R.R. Martin has basically said he's not telling us because they're quite spoilery. Dawn is their great sword, and it is currently at Starfall because there are no worthy Danes to be the sword of the morning and bear it. But it will almost certainly, I think, come back into circulation in the Winds of Winter. I think there's a good chance that Gerald Dane is going to be stealing it, and he is going to pronounce himself the Sword of the Morning, or perhaps something more like the Sword of the Evening. That's Darkstar, that character. That's his kind of nickname. Will we find out the house words? I think, again, that might be a Dream of Spring thing rather than the Winds of Winter thing, because I think that we're going to get the sort of the denouement at the end of it. This is going to be the sword, I think, will travel from Starfall across to King's Landing. I think that's where it's going to be at the end of the Winds of Winter. I think I did. Yes, we had one other super chat, which was the Voice of Reason saying, thank you very much, saying a Val, the Wildling Princess POV chapter might be interesting. Dance with Dragons seemed like it was setting her up for something at times. Yeah, so Val is, again, this is a book-only character. She's up at the wall. She is a Wildling princess. She she's done a few worthwhile things, like going off and finding Tormund, and she was sort of partly involved in the rather complicated baby swap between Mance Rayder's baby and Gilly's baby. So there's a whole thing going on there. I think whether we'll have a POV chapter, I don't know. Yes, it would be interesting. I think what we will find is that there is Melisandre is going to be interested in King's blood, and the King beyond the wall is king of sorts, I guess. And then obviously she will be looking for Shireen as the heir to the Iron Throne in the eyes of Stannis, and her at least. So yes, it will be there. I think that her role, as much as anything else, is going to be the person who is holding the fort for the and quite literally the fort for the wildlings in a way that Tormund, who in the books is like Tormund, but even more so, he's not really the kind of the learned person who's going to be there leading people. I think she's going to be there as the sort of the leader, and also with the link across to the baby swap. I think that's her link, that she's going to be the person who's going to be talking about that. Right, let's go back. Shade of the Evening says a Tormund POV. Yeah, that would be something to behold, wouldn't it? Okay, let's go back to some questions from my patrons. Maura Lee is asking about Meereen. Victarion Greyjoy is heading to Meereen to find Dany and use Dragonbinder. Dany is with the Dothraki. There is a war brewing. How do you think this will resolve? Will Victarion get to use Dragonbinder to try to get Dany's dragons? So, yes, as I said earlier, there are a lot of characters going on. There is a big battle happening. at Meereen, and we see this from a number of different angles in the pre-release chapters of the Winds of Winter. So Victarion has arrived. His forces have, to take a step back, Meereen is being besieged, and they have to do something because there's a plague outside their doors, and the Yunkish who are besieging them are starting to fling plague bodies into Meereen. So they have to do something. So we get Barristan rallies the troops and charges out to try and get rid of the catapults and to try and take on the besieging forces. While that's happening, suddenly the Ironborn arrive, disembark, and start attacking people on the side of the defensive Meereen, because Victarion is there ostensibly on behalf of Euron, but really he thinks he's clever enough to be able to outthink Euron. He's not, but he thinks he can, and he is going to try and marry Daenerys himself and claim her dragon with the dragon binder, the dragon controlling horn. Now, that will not go to plan. The reason why it will not go to plan is that the one person that he seems to have trusted inexplicably more than anyone else is this guy called Makoro, his red priest that he kind of like pulled up out of the sea, and Makoro is there on a mission to support Daenerys. And there is absolutely, because he and the higher ups in the worship of the Red God, they believe that Daenerys is the prince that was promised. She is Azor Ahai reborn, and Makoro has been sent off there to help her. And so there is absolutely no way that he is going to allow Victarion to take her dragons away from her. So that plan is not going to work. It's possible that the horn will get blown in the midst of battle. Nobody can completely control this. One dragon, Drogon, is obviously away with Dany. The other two are locked away deep underneath Meereen. Now, so it's possible that the horn will be blown. Whoever blows it, I'm pretty sure, will die. Victarion's got a few happy-go-lucky sailors lined up to do this. How will it play out? Well, I think Meereen will stay standing, but I think that there will inevitably be Daenerys coming back to a city which is, if not in ruins, then quite badly hurt by the battle that's been happening, with disease all over the place. So that is where we're going to end up. The interesting thing about all of this, the thing that we do not know the detail of, is what Euron's doing. Because Euron is, first of all, he's almost certainly got a spy in the camp. Get into that if you're interested. So he knows what's going on, but he is, it would appear, about to cast a massive spell off the coast of Old Town. A huge battle during which he is going to sacrifice holy people, priests and the like from a variety of different religions, and his unborn child, given the fact that he is the king of the Iron Islands, that makes that child have king's blood. So he is going to be doing some really quite meaty magic at the exact same time as Victarion arriving for that battle and trying to get those dragons. So if a dragon is controlled by the dragon horn, dragon binder, it will, I humbly predict, not be Victarion who gains control of it, but it will be Euron. That's the only if, because we do not know exactly what Euron's got in mind, but that's certainly, the timing seems too coincidental. Lisa Love saying, for Aaron Daniel, we unemployed must stick together. Yeah, absolutely. The guys, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. That's really kind. Thank you. connected to this, talking about what's going on in Meereen, Jared says, how do you think Sir Barristan's story will differ in the Winds of Winter compared to the show? Do you think he will survive to make it back to Westeros? So he is, in the books, basically now in charge of Meereen. And he is old, a lot older than he appeared on the show, but also formidable, an absolute legend in his own lifetime. And the question of whether he will survive, I think he probably will. I think that he will probably become a part of Daenerys's council. So she is going to, what the sort of the longer term impact of Daenerys arriving back is that whereas she started out without many people from Westeros to counsel her, suddenly she's going to find herself surrounded by all these people. She's going to have Tyrion, she's going to have Marwyn the Mage appear, she's going to have Sir Barristan, Jorah's going to be coming back, she's going to have all of these people all surrounding her. And Sir Barristan being the in her Kingsguard gives her some legitimacy because Sir Barristan was in the Kingsguard for Aerys II, so that gives her some legitimacy. In the same way that Aegon almost certainly will allow Gerald Dane into his Kingsguard because this has an echo of legitimacy because Arthur Dane was also in that same classic Kingsguard for Aerys II. So yeah, I think he probably will survive, but his role will be diminished. What he has been doing in terms of technical plot wise for the last book or so is give Dany bits of information about Westeros. Jorah used to be the person who would do that. Then it's Barristan, and he would tell her things about Rhaegar, and he'd tell her things about what Westeros was like and all the rest of it, and always get conveniently interrupted just before he says something really interesting. But that's what his role was to talk about Westeros and the characters, so that Daenerys has an understanding of her history. With these other characters coming in, they can do the same thing, and so his role from a kind of a technical perspective, a writing perspective, will be slightly diminished. He's then more symbolic than anything else, and he is the person who has got the greatest ability of sort of leading an army. So that will probably be his role, as being this kind of like overall strategy supervisor. Okay, so let's have a look at a question from Genevieve Rivers, saying, what do you think the role of the Tyrells will be going forward, and how will it be different from the show, particularly with Loras? Do you think there is sufficient reason to believe what we've heard about the retaking of Dragonstone isn't true, and could we see the return of an unmaimed Loras? I find it interesting that the only first-hand account we get comes from someone who pulled a Targaryen prince scam on Cersei. Okay, so there's a lot here. With Loras and Dragonstone, for show-only people or for book readers who have forgotten, because it was quite a smaller point when there's a lot of larger things going on. Dragonstone was Stannis's. Stannis obviously has headed all the way up north. That has meant that there's just a small garrison left on Dragonstone. Dragonstone is a castle, but it's not like the kind of a famed castle, a really defendable castle. It's the kind of thing that you could theoretically take. It's not something like Storm's End that legendarily is really hard to get at, or the Eyrie or something like that. Dragonstone, if you had enough people, you could get in. So it's there with just this sort of small garrison, and basically Cersei eventually decides that she wants to take it, she wants to capture it, and she sends Loras off. Loras begs to go off and do this, and also another book-only character called Aurane Waters, who is the new master of ships, I think. They go off, and the reports come back. Aurane Waters returns back and says, "We've captured it." But Loras, although he was very valiant and all the rest of it, he's been seriously injured, and can't really return right now because he's, maimed all over the place. So that's what's going on. Pardon me. That's what's going on. Aurane Waters is not necessarily the most accurate of witnesses, as often is the case with George R. R. Martin things. If you don't actually see something happen, then you can't necessarily believe it if somebody's telling you about it. He was originally a Stannis loyalist, and then the last we see of him is disappearing. He then heads off with his fleet, and there are hints that maybe he's gone off to the Stepstones, the whole archipelago of islands that sort of link across the bottom of the narrow sea, and that's where lots of pirates go. That would be quite interesting, because that's the way that Daenerys would have to come back through if she's going to invade Westeros. So she may meet him there. But anyway, do I think that what we heard about Loras is true? It's possible. This is one of those things we simply do not have enough information yet. We've just got a story told by one person who's not necessarily the most accurate of witnesses, but we'd have to try and work out exactly what his game is there. In any event, Loras hasn't returned. So Loras, I think, isn't, and he would want to return, because Marjorie Tyrell is in a lot of trouble back in King's Landing. So I think it's entirely likely that he has been badly injured. If there are some lies going on there, then he might be captured. But in any event, I don't think that he's just sat there twiddling his thumbs, feeling very happy about what's going on. So that's entirely possible. In terms of the Tyrells more broadly, so Marjorie has been captured by the Faith of the Seven, the High Sparrow. Olenna has gone back to Highgarden. Mace Tyrell is still bumbling around. I think that the overall character arc of her coming out and gaining the love of the people. Loras has got the love of the people. She has the love of the people. She is getting Tommen wrapped around her little finger. That arc is going to carry on, I'm sure, in the books the way that it did on the show. I think that what we will see is that the Tyrells will largely be destroyed, whether that is by Cersei out of a fit of jealousy, or as it was on the show, or whether it will be through an invasion by Fagon, who will almost certainly be attacking King's Landing. I would certainly see it entirely possible that Cersei might use the Tyrells to cover her retreat, and just sort of like trick Mace Tyrell into some stupid military maneuver, so that she can get away, and then the Tyrells get defeated, and the Tyrells get the blame for losing King's Landing, and she gets away safely. So I could certainly see that happening as a possibility. In any event, they're going to be ending up in roughly the same position, where really you're only left with Olenna Tyrell over in Highgarden, as we sort of approach the last book, or the last book and a half. That, I think, is where we're going to be ending up with the Tyrells. They're going to be diminished. They were never, ironically, they were never the most powerful house in the Reach. The Hightowers were. So I think what we will see is more of the Hightowers coming to the fore. But interesting. So the Tyrells are not. They're not endgame. An endgame family. Loras he's an interesting character, but I don't think that he's going to be one of the big and important characters at the very end. I've got, we'll go on for a little bit more, but I'm going to, I think my last, oh no, I've got 3 or 4 more questions over from Patreon, and then I'll start dipping a bit more into the chat. So Haimanti Mukherjee, I hope that's how you pronounce it, saying, "Hi Robert, love what you do. I'm a new patron. Welcome. It's great to see you. Wanted to know if you could schedule a live chat on Friday India time, which I guess would be Saturday for you. Want to ask so many questions, can't do it on a weeknight." Well, in terms of doing things that work for other people, what I've done is I've moved the live stream time, my usual Thursdays, I've brought forward 1 hour. If you're watching live, you'll know that now. So it's starting at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time rather than 6 p.m. That's because a lot of people have asked me in the UK and in mainland Europe, they've been saying, can we have it just a little bit earlier? So it's now at 10 o'clock UK time, 11 o'clock Central European time. What I have done in the past, and I'm very keen to do again in the future, is to do a few more other points of the day so that other people who otherwise might not be able to watch will be able to. India is, my guess would be like 6 hours, something like that, ahead of me. So I would probably do something there, which would be lunchtime-ish for me, evening for India, and that would probably be quite early morning for America. But we'll try and do a few at different times. I know not everybody watches these live. A lot of people watch these on catch-up, but I will try and make sure that I can dot a few around at different times so that everyone does get a chance to watch live if they would like to do that. But thank you very much for becoming a patron. Really appreciate it. 26 Art Girl was asking, I find what happened to Ned at the Tower of Joy confusing. At one point he faints. This is slightly moving away from the Winds of Winter, but we'll come back to the Winds of Winter in just a second. At one point he faints and remembers little, then he destroys the tower. What do you think actually happened? I'm going to be covering this in my next video on the Tower of Joy. This is that element, I've said a number of times, is the bit that I find most intriguing. That and why Ned left the bodies. So Ned fainting, which he appears to do, is curious. He remembers no more after they found him. They presumably being Howland Reed and Arthur Dane is my guess. But then he pulls the tower down. This is not just something in his fever dream. This is something he remembers doing brick by brick. And then he puts all of the bodies of the fallen into cairns in the area and then doesn't take them back. He just takes back the body of Lyanna, which is a huge insult to his bannermen. Not to mention, these are people he owes a huge amount to. They literally gave their lives for him. And such a grudge it is that Barbary Dustin, again a book-only character, she still has a grudge against Ned Stark after he's dead 20 years later in the books. So to the extent that she keeps on talking about it. So that is a huge issue for me. I think it's one of these things where we do not know, but I'm going to, in my next video, I'm going to give my best understanding of what was going on there and why. And I think that the starting point has to be why would he tear down the tower? What's that about? He had a newborn baby. He wasn't wanting to muck about. He had to be heading off somewhere in order to find to do something with it. He doesn't want to be in the middle of effectively this kind of dusty land by the side of a huge pass heading into the mountains. This isn't the place you want to just be hanging around with a baby for no reason. He was wanting to get on and do stuff, and yet he stopped to do certain things. And I think we have to ask, why is it? What was it that was so important that meant that he had to do those things? So I will be covering that in my next video, and if I have the time in that video, I might make a second video. Why did he then go to Starfall? and what happened there, because I think that is absolutely central to everything that happened afterwards, him going to Starfall. There are lots of rumours about Shara Dane, and then Willa and all the rest of it, all centred around Starfall. Why did he go there? What happened when he got there? So that's what the next video is going to be about. So do tune in for that one. Amanda Robinson, thank you so much for the super chat, saying, "Hey, I love your content, Robert. Thank you for all your work. Quick question. What's happening with the Well Told Tale? It's such a great channel." Yeah, guys, so with the Well Told Tale, apologies, I know I'm a few weeks late and it's been quite patchy content recently. That's partly because I'm quite busy and finding it quite hard to get everything out that I want, but I am currently going through a search for to try and get some editing help on both of my channels, which will allow me to increase my output. So that's part of it. Secondly, I have got an announcement coming up on the Well Told Tale that I'm doing a little bit of work on, which I always spoil my videos, so I might as well spoil my announcements. So I'm going to be launching it as a podcast alongside it being a YouTube channel, and that is going to be happening next month. So I'm doing a little bit of work behind the scenes to get that all set up. Once everything's in place and I've got proper editing, I'm going to say team, but that makes it sound like it's I'm going to have an army of people working with me. That's not how this works. It's just me doing all of this. But if I can have somebody who can do the stuff that it doesn't need me to be there to do, then that would be fantastic. Once I've got everything sorted out, then hopefully we'll be back on having a weekly sort of a structure of every Wednesday we'll have a new story, a new part of the story coming out. And just as a little teaser, my hope is that the one on Halloween or the day before Halloween, I'm looking to be doing a little bit of Edgar Allan Poe just to add to the atmosphere. So thank you. Yeah, I really enjoy the Well Told Tale. It is a passion project for me. I've not forgotten it. I'm just doing a few things behind the scenes just to put it into the right place where I can push forward into the next year with it. So thank you for that question. Andrew K was asking if I've got any plans for Saturday live streams. Yeah, absolutely. As I was saying earlier, moving around, doing them on different days. I think I will. What I tend to do, for those who have watched this channel through any of the seasons when I've been covering a season, so for Game of Thrones season 8, similarly for Westworld season 2, what I did was I went up to 2 live streams a week, sticking with my normal Thursday slot and also doing a Sunday pre-show slot. I think I will do that for when Westworld season 3 comes out, and I'll do a Westworld pre-show live stream as well on the Sunday. But Saturday, yeah, I've done a Saturday live stream before, and it went really well, so I will try my best to do one of them in the near future. John St. Baptiste was asking about how much of the Old Town story arc we're going to see in the Winds of Winter. I think this is a great question. So I think it's a great question because the idea that Old Town has a story arc, because it's a place and things do happen there, but there's a number of character story arcs that sort of move through it. So what we're going to be seeing is, so Sam is going to be starting his studies while he's there. He will definitely be learning things while he's there. We will have what happens with the Pate, Jack and Hagar thing, trying to find the book, The Death of Dragons. There's definitely a plot line happening there. There's also a plot line happening with the Ironborn and with Euron, who are just outside Old Town at the moment. The Ironborn are not very secretly trying to break into Old Town and undo their defenses. So there's definitely going to be an attack on Old Town at some point. And there's also a few kind of mentions of things going on that we just probably should be aware of, because they're not really plots yet, but they probably will become plots. One of those is Layton Hightower, who is, as I said bit ago, the Hightowers are hugely ancient and hugely powerful as a house. They are incredibly rich, and yet they've been very, very quiet. Layton Hightower's hardly been seen at all. He's hiding up the top of the high tower, allegedly performing some magic. So there's something going on there. There's also Illyrio Mopatis who is behind this big Aegon-Phagon plot. He muttered darkly something in passing about, we have some influential friends in the Reach. Now, who might that be? I think there's a possibility that that could be the Hightowers. So there are a lot of plot lines that are sort of moving in and around and through Old Town. As a place itself, it's the kind of place that just endures. If you go back through history, it's just stayed there. Yes, there have been times when it's been decimated by plague or by invasion or whatever, but it always just comes back. So that is what Old Town's kind of spirit is. But if I had to bet, I'm not alone in this, because the imagery is very clear. George R. R. Martin has talked about the Citadel in the same way that he would talk about the Great Library of Alexandria. The Great Library of Alexandria was burned, and I think that there's a very clear feel that this might be what happens to Old Town, to the library in the Citadel in the books. So this is probably going to happen if it happens in connection with the Ironborn pillaging, coming in, trying to take stuff. Is it gets burnt down. So I can see a situation where we have all of these stories intersecting, lots of magic going on, and then an invasion of Old Town, fire breaking out, and people scrabbling around to try and get what bits of knowledge they can. That will include Jack and Hagar as Pate, that will include Sam, and I think that these people will then be heading off and away to return to wherever they want to go with the bits of information, the books that they got. So Old Town is not an end game kind of place. Its purpose, as far as the end game is going to be, is to get the information out to the people who need to have that information. Fundamentally, the people who need the information are Sam and whatever is going on with Pate and the Faceless Men. So that's what's happening there, and it's then going to be serving as a base, I suspect, for Euron. That is where we're going, and I think we'll probably see a huge amount of that happen in the Winds of Winter. Which, incidentally, the Winds of Winter, I should probably say, timescales. The Winds of Winter is going to take place over quite a significant amount of time, because you get, if you just mark out one person's journey, Daenerys, she will have to come back from Vaes Dothrak to Meereen, having spent a bit of time there. That will take weeks at least, if not months. Then she will have to amass whatever fleet she has, gather all the forces that she wants. She might want to take out a few other cities first. That will take months. Then she will need to sail with all of her fleet right away, all the way across from Meereen, all the way around through to, let's assume she lands at Dragonstone. That will take months. It's going to be at least a year, probably a couple of years timescale that we're looking at for the Winds of Winter. So it's not like Sam's going to arrive and then just run away. He will get some research done. He will have time to actually start learning, and we will probably see some Sam POV chapters within Old Town, within the Citadel. So this is a long time frame that we're looking at for the Winds of Winter. Ravine Hawk, thank you so much, asking for Stephen Toth. I love it when people do this on Super Chats, asking on a question that they see someone else asks. That's really kind of you, thank you. What do you believe will be the big ending chapter, like John's death in Dance? Good question. So I think that there are, well, where this is going to end up is one of two places, and it could be either Daenerys's landing over at Dragonstone with the dragons, or arriving at King's Landing, or something along the lines of either the end of season thing we had at the end of season 6, I think, where we get Daenerys's invasion is now starting. Either that, or we get the equivalent, I think, of what we had at the end of season 7, where we have the wall falling. Those are the two kind of ending points that I could imagine. Maybe they'll have both of them. Maybe one of them will be pushed into the next book. But I think that what we're looking at is one of those two big things, because the meta narrative here that we've got is the Song of Ice and Fire. It is about the two forces of ice and fire who are both going to be attacking Westeros from outside its shores, if you like, and attacking it from both ends. And that is what, when we're getting the Winds of Winter, that is what is going to be happening, is those two forces. Now, I think that either of those would be a fantastic place just to end off on this book, because they leave still a huge amount of plot to do in the last book, but they allow things to have progressed a long way beforehand. So both of them seem to be about the right sort of timing in terms of the plot, and both of them would be big and symbolic enough and impressive enough, I personally think. Let's have a look. We've got, I think this is my last question over on Patreon. So we'll do that, and then we'll get into questions from the chat. Actually, I've got a couple of other super chats I'll do very quickly. First, Lisa loves saying, for Mod Mary's idea of giving love to the mods. Yeah, moderators, thank you so much. You do brilliant work there in the chat. A lot of people don't realize quite how much work it is being a moderator, but I've got some fantastic moderators. Particular shout out to Chrissy Voldstones, who is the fastest blaster of spam in the entire world. Thank you so much for doing that. Donna, and if you're in the chat and you're watching live, please do show a little bit of love for the moderators. They do fantastic work, not just on my channel, but on a lot of other channels. A lot of people do the same thing on lots of different channels. This really is a sort of a community of people here. Donna Daly, thank you for your super chat, saying it is likely that at some point in the Winds of Winter there will be 3 living Lord Commanders of the Night's Watch. Will this have any impact on the Watch? Well, what we will have is Jon having left the Night's Watch, and therefore he has disavowed himself from his vows, and then we will have whoever takes after him, which may be Ed, who knows, but will it have any impact on the Watch? I think yes, the fact that there is uncertainty about leadership, but I think that I would place this not within that specific example of what's going on there, but in the bigger picture, that the Watch, to start with, is an incredibly hard thing to govern, because it's based at the moment in 3 different areas, but they're hundreds of miles apart in really hard conditions to get from one to the other. You've got the castles at both ends of the wall, as well as Castle Black in the middle. The numbers have been dwindling so much over the previous years that and the quality of people, so to speak, and quality is the wrong word, but in terms of the people who were there because they want to be there compared to the people who are there because they've been sent there, against their will, that balance has completely shifted as well. So what we've got here is a whole load of people who don't necessarily want to be there, who are only there under threat of death, with poor lines of communication between the different parts of the wall, and having then given up huge amounts of that wall to the wildlings, and suddenly finding themselves facing, as winter draws in, and winter, it's much more than it was on the show, that they basically give up being above ground at Castle Black during the winter, because the snow is so thick. They just used underground tunnels everywhere. They don't go outdoors like that. They use underground tunnels and then go up to the top of the wall and just sort of do that. So they just abandon what's happening above ground. It would be incredibly hard for them to be mounting any kind of real resistance, and you've got the wildlings there who are now in control of pretty much all the other forts, and with a significant amount of people there at Castle Black. The Night's Watch are no longer really in much control of what's going on. They're just hanging around. So if you add into that a confusion of leadership, yes, you've got a big problem. It will have a huge impact, and the Night's Watch will not be the force that they should be, and they're not there going to be giving out a clear sign to the rest of the Seven Kingdoms about what needs to be done and what is happening. Okay. Last question from my patrons. This is from Leathery Wings, saying, do you think we will see the end of Lady Stoneheart in the Winds of Winter? And if so, how do you think it will happen? This is a really interesting question. So I think the short answer is no. I think she will carry on into A Dream of Spring. Because George R. R. Martin was very clear that when she wasn't in the show, he was disappointed that she wasn't in the show and felt that this was an important oversight on their part, which, given the fact that he talks about this but doesn't talk about the character of young Griff Aegon Fagon, who is leading an entire invasion and claiming to be the rightful king of the Seven Kingdoms, and he cared less about that than he cared about Lady Stoneheart, says quite a lot. She clearly has important things to do, more important than she's done already. So she will do things in the Winds of Winter. I've speculated on this, I think possibly even last week. I think there's a fairly good chance that it will be her rather than Arya who takes out the phrase. I think that there's a reasonable chance she might lead, perhaps supported by Nymeria and Nymeria's wolf pack, but she might lead some sort of attack on the twins and get her revenge there, rather than Arya nipping in and being an assassin. So I think she will do a huge amount of things. In terms of her story, her arc, such as it is, starts with her, all she is about is gaining vengeance for what happened to her family. Gaining vengeance for what, as far as she's concerned, Robb was killed, Bran and Rickon were killed by Theon, Sansa has gone missing, and Arya, last heard of, is up at Winterfell being married to a Bolton. So she will have all of this grievance there. Her arc, I think, will come to an end when she recognizes that, actually, you know what, Bran and Rickon weren't killed, they were still alive. Sansa is still alive as well, and safe, or safe as anyone can be around Littlefinger. And Arya is also alive and safe and not where she thought she was. And I think once she gets to that point, and possibly also once she realizes why Ned, and I think that she will at some point get this information, why Ned did what he did with Jon and why he'd been lying to her all that time, I think that she will understand and come to some sort of peace. What why I think all of that is important is that what seems to be the case with these people who've been brought back is that they are clinging on to something, and that when they let that go, that's when they die again. Beric, he'd kind of lost, by the time he'd been brought back all of those times, he kind of lost the vision of why he was being brought back. And so he was happy to not come back another time, to pass on the life force onto her. Once she reaches that point where she realizes actually all the things that have been driving her, the need for vengeance, have been dealt with, that's when she can die again as a character. So I think that's what's going to happen. I think that means that she probably needs to work her way all the way through the Winds of Winter, wreaking havoc through the Riverlands, and then at some point in Dream of Spring that she will probably have the end of her character arc. Let's have a quick look back in the chat. Fantastic chat, by the way, guys. I've been spotting a few of these as they've been coming through. In Deep Geek, so Ravenhawk saying it's pronounced Raven. My apologies. That makes sense now I look at it. Jinx916, hi there, saying can't stay, just wanted to say my mug is awesome. Fantastic. I'm glad you got your mug. Guys, I've been starting to get a few thanks from people who've been getting their mug, and I am really pleased. So thank you. If you're interested, link down below. And did I get, I think there's one more super chat before I kind of, there's a couple here. Okay, so we've got Morgan R.R. Hayes with super sticker. Thank you so much, with a chicken doing a thumbs up. I like it. Dean Slowy, guys, your names are I always mispronounce them. I apologize. Says Sansa will murder Sweet Robin. Her story needs agency. Harry the Heir plan only works after Sweet Robin's death. Littlefinger needs Sweet Robin's death to look like natural causes. Poison plan not working. Sansa has motive and means, and nobody would suspect her. Okay, so this is what happens in the Eyrie. So Sansa is disguised as Elaine. I think I said Alicent earlier in the stream. Elaine is the name that she's going under there. She is being set up with a guy called Harry the Heir, who is sort of in the line of succession after Sweet Robin, effectively. So Littlefinger has set her up with him. Now, the suggestion here from Dean is that her story needs agency, which I agree with completely. The question is the point at which she gains that agency. So the plan with Harry the Heir only works if Sweet Robin dies, and then she comes. Then she would be able to effectively take control over the Eyrie. Yes, sort of, although at the moment it's probably worth pointing out that effectively Littlefinger is already in control of all of that. As the Lord Protector, I can't remember his exact title, but that's where he's at. In terms of her killing Sweet Robin, that's entirely possible, but I think her agency will come more and more in the way that it did in the show as she gets closer up to Winterfell. Now, I think that what she is wanting to do is get herself back up to Winterfell. And I think that doesn't mean her doing exactly what Littlefinger tells her to do, and this will be what Littlefinger's plan is. So I think that's entirely possible, but I don't think it's necessarily the case. What I will do, though, is thank you for the super chat, by the way. I find this fascinating. It's Sansa's plan, and what happens next with Sansa is I think one of the big unknowns we've got going into the Winds of Winter, because her storyline is very different from what happens in the books. In the books, obviously, she goes over and she has the whole plot line with Ramsay. She doesn't have that on the show. So she needs to get from where she is up to Winterfell, and she needs to, as you say, get that agency. One of my videos that over the next few months that I will be doing, looking at the Winds of Winter, I'm going to be doing definitely one over Daenerys and Essos and Meereen, one of them about what's happening with the Aegon invasion, another one about Jon and North, but I will definitely be doing one about Sansa off the back of this, and looking at what is it that we can expect from her to get her to where we think she needs to be at the end of this book. So thank you. I think it's a really good question. And I think you're right that people would not necessarily suspect her of doing it, although people are starting to notice that she isn't just this kind of like, firstly, that she may not be who she claims to be, and secondly, that she's not dim. It's Kilgore, thank you so much, saying, which plot thread are you most excited to explore? I think in the short term, it's the one over in Meereen that I've been talking about with the battle and Daenerys returning. There are so many moving parts with all these different characters coming in. I can't wait to see how that one all works out. Michaela S, thank you so much for the super sticker. That's also a chicken with a thumbs up. I do like that one, it has to be said. Aaron Daniel says, where are you from? The Welsh border is my guess. How wrong am I? A couple of 100 miles. Originally, I am from the south of England, so my accent is very much a south of England accent. Mod Mary, thank you very much for the super chat, saying, let's talk about the big scene in The God's Eye, Burn Baby Burn. Okay, I don't think this will be in the Winds of Winter, if it's what I'm thinking you're referring to, which is a long-held theory from many people. Chris over at Smokescreen has definitely been talking about this for a long time. I had a chat with him over on this channel, if you want to look for that video, based on the idea that the Isle of Faces has to burn. Now, the reason why is this is slightly convoluted logic, but if we take from the show the idea, which I think is the right idea, I don't think they showed it at all well, but it was very clear this is what they're trying to do, is that the key to ending the White Walkers' threat is not to kill them, but to undo the magic that created them. That was definitely what they were trying to do on the show. What they were trying to do on the show was show us that they were created by plunging dragonglass into the heart of the Night King in front of a weirwood tree, and they were uncreated by pushing Valyrian steel into the heart of the Night King in front of a weirwood tree. And so that was what happened. It was the uncreation of the White Walkers rather than the killing of the White Walkers, undoing the magic, as it were. So that was what they were trying to show us. If we are going with the idea that there's this strong connection with the Children of the Forest and the others, which I think is very clear symbolically all the way through the Song of Ice and Fire, that the magic that is behind them is tied in with that, it's tied in with the trees, tied in with the weirwoods, then if you destroy the weirwood network, that theoretically would end the threat of the others. So is that going to happen? Possibly. Now, I think that the logic still holds. However, the fact that Bran is going to be king, so we're told, has happened on the show, and we've been told that this is direct from George R.R. Martin, that Bran ends on the throne, implies that the Weirwood network wins in some aspect, which implies that perhaps it isn't just destroying all of the Weirwood network as the answer. So I think that there definitely will be a battle above the god's eye, that we've got so much sort of hints of that and foreshadowing and all the rest of it. I think we definitely will see all of the things that we've been told about that's happened there before start to be pulled together with the pact and all the rest of it. I think that we will probably see a burning of at least one weirwood, perhaps all of them on the god's eye. I do not know. I do not think the entirety of the weirwood network will be destroyed. That was quite a long-winded answer, but the short version of that is that the logic still holds that the magic of the others has to be undone. Whether that is going to be in such a dramatic way as we thought perhaps before season 8, I think that the chances of that have come down a notch because of what we've learned through that. Will Moss says, you sound like you're in the south of England. Do you have any IDG get-togethers in London or elsewhere? Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm from. I said just a moment ago. I probably said that just after you posted it. Yes, I do come originally from the south of England. That's where my accent comes from. Do I have any IDG get-togethers in London or elsewhere? I haven't done. I mean, I am in London relatively regularly. If people would find that something they'd be interested in, if there are enough people who would love to get together and just sit in a pub and talk about Game of Thrones for an evening, then let's do it. That would be great. I honestly don't know how many people would be interested in that and would be able to get to London or near it. So let me know in the chat if that's you, or if you're not watching live, then let me know in the comments if that's something you'd be interested in. If so, we'll try and organise something. But yeah, thank you. Turbo says Southern England is the cool side of England. As I'm from the south, I shall say yes. Dean Slowy, again, I mispronounced your name. My theory, events, thank you for the super chat, by the way. Events started with the year of the false spring. Winter is not here like the end of the Dance with Dragons shows. It's going to be like the year of the false winter. Gives plots more time to develop. I think that's a good theory. Where I'm at the moment is that, so the year of the false spring, my view, and I will cover this in full in a video at the end of my series on Robert's Rebellion. I think that was the Weirwood Network, specifically Bloodraven, Howland Reed, and the Children of the Forest, manipulating the weather in order to create a situation where the turning at Harrenhal could happen. Because basically there was winter, and then there was a gap of a few months where everyone went, oh, winter's gone, let's have a big tournament. And Rhaegar organised it and got all of the main people in there at one moment. The moment that the tournament had finished, winter happens again. And so it's almost as if it was held off for a bit and then it came back, and it came back really quite strongly. There was like frozen rivers and icicles hanging from King's Landing and things like that. This was not just it got a bit cold again, but it was like, this is actually winter again. So I think that the year of the full spring was actually the work of people like Bloodraven in order to precipitate what happened at the tourney at Harrenhal, which is not just Rhaegar and Lyanna meeting. That was big and important, but also George R. R. Martin has said the tourney at Harrenhal, so many things happened at the tourney at Harrenhal that he could write an entire book, and a George R. R. Martin book at that, about what happened there. He could write hundreds of pages about what happened at the tourney at Harrenhal. This wasn't just like a few random things. This was a lot happened. It really is absolutely central to the tourney at Harrenhal. So I think that's what happened there. In terms of whether or not this is the year of the false winter, one thing which is noticeable is that winter is a lot more obvious around Winterfell than other places. So Winterfell, it is very, very wintry. We've got snowdrifts 30, 40 feet high, the kind that you could jump off the top of a wall and into the snow, a really high wall into the snow, and it would break your fall absolutely fine. Like we saw with Theon and Sansa on the show, that's exactly what happened in the books. Winter's so cold that all but one of the gates of Winterfell have frozen shut, and no matter what they do, they cannot unfreeze the gates. That's how cold it is at Winterfell. It is almost impossible to move about. Elsewhere in the north, it seems a lot less. We get characters like Davos, who seems to be happily moving around. White Harbour is further south, but he's been moving around there, and he's going to be heading up to Skagos, and it doesn't seem that bad. Even in Castle Black, it doesn't seem as bad as it is at Winterfell. It seems as if the centre of this is at Winterfell, which means it's a more magical impact than just the turning of the seasons. So that we perhaps could expect, because this is the seasons and what is happening are magical. So that's my theory on what's happening, is that this isn't just the turning of the seasons. We're now starting to see the magical figures influence what's going on, and we will see the winter come from the north down south, being brought by the others, in the same way that we read about the stories of the Long Night. So that's my theory about what's going on. I do like this idea about it being a false winter, but that's my personal take at the moment. Okay, let's as I say, I've run out of questions now from my patrons, so I'm now going to dig into a few questions in the chat. Mads Danny Lothston says, how about Howland in Winds? Yeah, I'd love Howland Reed to be in the Winds of Winter. My guess is that he probably will be emerging in A Dream of Spring, because he knows so much. The moment that he arrives and starts saying stuff, that's the moment at which we start getting all the revelations about who Jon is and all the rest of it. I think that's not going to happen until the last book, because I think that he has to get into the relationship with Dany first before he learns about his true identity. So I think that that means that because of that iteration of events, and how at the moment Jon and Dany are so far apart, they need to come closer to each other before they can start their relationship, and so that has to happen first. Then Howland arrives and says stuff. So I think Howland Reed is likely to be a little bit further down into the last book. Right, let's have a quick look through the chat, see what questions are going on. Yeah, Genevieve Rivers saying, I believe George R. R. Martin has said he could write a George R. R. Martin length book about it, but he won't. So yeah, absolutely, this is about the turning at Harrenhal. He could, he's not going to, unfortunately. Let's have a quick flick through. Lots of people saying where they're from. A few people saying that they're quite interested in having a meetup. So maybe we'll try and sort something out. That'll be fun. I think, guys, I think I've come to the end of it. I was just quickly flicking through. I think actually, as we're coming up to 2 hours and I'm starting to feel a bit croaky, I think what I will do is I will start to draw to a close now. Tales of Ruin saying, any thoughts about what Aurane Waters will do? My best guess at the moment is that he is going to set himself up in the Stepstones. We had in Fire and Blood a reminder of all the people who've counted themselves as king of the Stepstones and the Narrow Sea. I wonder whether he might do that. And I think that there will be some confrontation between him and Daenerys' fleet when they finally arrive and try and make their way through the Stepstones up to Dragonstone and King's Landing. Whether he tries to fight them or whether he joins them is another matter, because Daenerys will not have sort of an admiral, as it were. I'm sure she will have somebody in charge of her fleet, but in terms of sort of a named character, she's got lots of people then who are starting to join her side. She will have a maester, she will have a hand, she will have sort of a general type character, but actually sort of an admiral, no, she won't have. So it may well be that he joins sides. Will Moss says, which side will Dawn take between Dany and Fagon? Well, what I will say to that is I'm going to do a whole video on it, but the short answer is Doran sent out his 2 children. One of them went to Daenerys to see whether he could get some kind of connection there, marriage. And Arianne, he's sent off to Aegon. We've got what happened with his son, Quentin, poor Quentin, is basically been burnt to a crisp. That's not going to go anywhere. The relationship with Daenerys, which leaves Arianne going off to find Aegon, and I think that is very much likely to be a better match. So I think we will see the Martells pulling in behind this Aegon the Sixth, or whatever he's going to, how he's going to style himself. I think that we will see that actually this turns not from being just a small invasion of a few people, but more and more people will start to throw their weight behind it, and it will turn into something that looks really quite credible. Okay, guys, I think that's how I said I was going to end there, but but I always get distracted a little bit by the questions. If you are watching this live, thank you so much in the chat. This had some fantastic questions. If you're watching this a little bit later, then somewhere up here, I think will appear a link to other live streams. In a few moments, a link to other live streams I've been doing, if you're interested in that. A link up here somewhere is a link to my Patreon page, if you're at all interested in either supporting the channel or getting access to some of the exclusive things I do just for my patrons. So guys, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed this. It's been a fantastic stream. I will see you this time next week. I will hopefully have a guest on this time next week, and I'm looking forward to it. Take care, everyone. I'll see you again soon.